Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Brian Martin at Passageways, your CSM, friendly CSM manager, and I'm here hosting today's onboard coffee break, our nice little formal. I hope you all have a nice cup of caffeinated joy in your hands. Today's conversation, we're just having a nice little informal chat with Michael Coghill. Michael's a person who works with RCB Bank, support engineer. He's been with the bank since 2010. If those of you who happened to join us last year for Powwow might recognize him. He was one of our presenters, very much on a similar topic that he's going to be sharing with us today. His thoughts on device management and security for mobile devices for onboard users, or frankly any sort of thing with your bank. If any of your banks or organizations use mobile devices they want to keep secure, Michael's a good expert on that, and that's why we invited him to join us today. Michael, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Yes, this is Michael Coghill, and I'm glad to share a little bit of knowledge I have about managing these devices along with OnBoard.
Yeah, Michael, I think what you're going to share today is not just a little bit of knowledge. You're one of the more, frankly, knowledgeable people I have on the subject that I've run into. That's why I really want to thank you for sharing your insights and your expertise with us today. And I'm sure everybody will get a lot of value out of our conversations. But today's conversation is interactive. For everybody else out there, if you have things you want to speak up about, we do have Jessie here in the room with us. She's going to be monitoring our Q&A and chat windows. I have Gina in the room as well, one of our implementation CSMs. So we all are here to help assist in any way. So please feel free to share your insights, your thoughts, your questions, and we will get to those as we go along in the conversation. Hey, Michael, I'm going to go ahead and get our slide here going. We are using OnBoard to demonstrate, but this is Michael put this together for us, and go ahead and take it away, Michael.
Okay, sure. So basically, I'm going to go over a broad organization of how this works, and then we'll go into a little more detail in the following slide. So with our OnBoard setup, we mostly use iPads, and some people use their browsers, but we're going to primarily talk about Apple devices here. On the Android side, that they have a lot of these equivalent systems. If you guys want to use those instead, but basically, we start off with devices, which are the tablets, the phones, and the laptops. And if you have a mobile device management system, you can have a lot of extra security related to that you can control. And if you want to have a mobile device management system, there's a few things that are required. And you have two options. You have on-site, which is usually for larger organizations, or you have hosted services. And that would be, you tell them what you want your URL to be, and that's what they will make it for you. The on-site option requires you to have domains set up and SSL certificates, and then the hosted, has none of that requirements. With an MDM, you can push profiles and configurations. Those are more or less profiles would be what kind of security options you have on the device. Configurations would be email and things of that nature that you would push to the device. With Apple devices, you would have, it would be helpful if you sign up for Apple Business Manager. This is a relatively new development on the Apple side. It was just this thing below, which is DEP and VPP. I'll go into more detail later, but that's a device enrollment program. But Apple Business Manager has taken over and includes those two now. On the app side, you would have to install an application on each mobile device, MDM application. We'll go into more detail later on different vendors that are out there. There's a device threat app that you can also install that's a little different than just an MDM. It actually monitors the network on the device for any man-in-the-middle attacks. And also, of course, OnBoard, which is we're very security conscious here, being a bank, and OnBoard has a strong dedication to security, and we vet that thoroughly. So they wouldn't be in this mix if we didn't trust them. So
we appreciate that.
Okay, and then finally, you know, especially if you do an on-site hosted, an on-site version of this mobile device management, which this, you know, is going to get a little bit techie in all this talk. So an IT person might pick up a little more on this, but the network and firewall, you know, is involved in this. So if you have an IT team, you know, you would be talking with them and they would handle that, of course. And the final step in all of this is the users and IT. Users are kind of the last line of defense on any kind of loss of data. We can put all the rules in place to try to keep leakage from happening or security breaches, but users are sort of, you really need to make sure they're educated as well as possible too. So, yeah, so mobile device management. Basically, there's probably more than 50 different mobile device management vendors out there, but 3 of the top ones I am aware of are MobileIron, Jamf, and Moz 360. They all have their strengths and things that they do better. But I know that you know, we're pretty happy here with MobileIron, and Jamf is another one that is out there that is primarily focused on Apple devices, and Moz 360 is kind of like MobileIron. It'll do Android, Apple devices, Windows PCs, everything. So yeah, and so on having mobile device management, you can have some benefits like quick and secure device setup. When you normally would get an iPad, if you're in IT, for example, or a user, you would have to log into it with an Apple account. You'd have to download the app yourself and log into OnBoard. With the device management system, you can actually have that iPad be ready to set up with many fewer steps than you would normally. You turn that device on and Apple knows that you own that device, and so it tells that device to talk to your mobile device management system, and that would take over and breeze you through the setup process and even download OnBoard, for example, all on its own. So you can have a device set up in 5 minutes instead of, 20 or 30, the regular way.
So just to summarize there, you're saying that with one of these mobile device management systems that takes the whole process of setting up and initializing, say, an iPad, for example, from being something that the end user, maybe a director or executive would have to do themselves, to something that you can pretty much turn on and have it just automatically start working through the device management system. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. And if you do the necessary prep work beforehand, if you have remote locations where you're delivering a device, they can turn on the device and it'll set itself up and they'll be ready to go and OnBoard.
Wow.
It's called Zero Touch. So
I know there's quite a few folks out there that I've interacted with in the past that's the sort of thing they come and reach out to us quite a bit for extra help and questions on. So please take notes out there, everybody.
Yeah. So with an MDM, you can control a number of things, but some of the top things are policies you can push to the device and configurations, which I mentioned earlier. But password requirements, you can require certain complexities or lengths, or it requires them to change over so many days. You can also disable features you don't want them to use, such as FaceTime or sharing between email accounts or a copying out of OnBoard or something like that. You can remote wipe the device if you have to, or have it wipe itself if the user types their password wrong a certain number of times. And you can also set up sort of a similar to how you sign into a computer with Windows. You can have a user sign into an iPad and get the necessary apps that they're assigned, and then when they sign out, those apps can disappear. So
if you have multiple users using the same mobile devices, their sign-in would control what they have access to.
Exactly, yes. And it would delete the apps, such as OnBoard, for example. If you want one person to have it and another person not, it would delete that app as they sign out if you wished.
Nice.
Yeah. And and then you can force updates to the operating system of it or the apps, say you really want someone to have the updated version of OnBoard because you've had a notification that that's required, you can push those updates to the devices and they'll load on their own in the background.
So no more having to worry about if your directors have updated the app since the last time they logged in.
Yes, and personally, if I see any kind of notification saying that the app is recommended to be updated, I go in there and look at our list of directors and users and see what version of OnBoard they have, and I can quickly see if even a single one has an older version, and email or contact that person. If it's not updating on its own, because we generally push the update ourselves.
Nice, I like that.
Yeah. So it also does inventory, for tracking serial numbers and, the location if you need it, and when the last time it checked in. And then also there are user benefits, such as if this is a huge one. I'm sure anyone not in IT or in IT would appreciate this. If you forget your passcode to your device and you cannot get into it, you can call up your IT and they can unlock it for you. And you have a certain number of minutes before you need to reset a new passcode to it. And this will help. It's a lifesaver in those situations. So,
nice.
Yeah. And then there's you can push different backgrounds to the devices if you want to brand your devices, with, for us, example, RCB Bank, or whatever company logo you want to use. You can push that as a background to an iPad or an iPhone or Android and Windows computer.
Nice.
So, okay, so a little more detail about the Apple services that are available to help improve security. Apple Business Manager is an all-encompassing service now that includes DEP and VPP. DEP is the device enrollment program. So you basically sign up with Apple and you sign up with whoever you buy your mobile devices from, and together they verify that you're the one that purchased that device, therefore allow you to have extra control over the device that they would never let happen otherwise. Such as when it boots up, it will automatically go search for your mobile device management system and sign itself up. So even if someone were to steal one of your devices, they wouldn't be able to get into it because of the password. They would have it wipe, and then when it came back up, no matter what they did, it would still search for Apple, and Apple would say, oh, RCB Bank owns this iPad. So they basically have a big paperweight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to do that, you need your Dun & Bradstreet number, just to get a little more detail on that, but I won't go in further than that. But with the Apple Business Manager, it also has MDM pairing, where you pair it with whatever MDM you purchase, and it also has some certificates you'd have to pull from there and then load into your MDM. And that's a little bit on the IT side, but this may be helpful for them if they're on the call. Volume purchase program, that's just where you can go out, buy paid apps or free apps and push it to devices where the user does not have to log into the iTunes store at all. Or if it's a paid app, they don't have to pay for it. But with OnBoard, this is how we push OnBoard. We went out and purchased a bunch of free OnBoard licenses, and we push those to all of our users that need OnBoard, and they do not have to manage the updating in after that. So
gotcha. You're saying that in using this tool, you can pre-install the OnBoard app, the free OnBoard app for all your users.
Exactly.
No.
And you can push it to users that are not even tied to this entire ecosystem of Apple Business Manager. If it's a bring your own device, you can still push these apps to those users as long as they agree to the terms.
Nice. Yeah, we have. I know there's lots of organizations out there we work with that in some cases they buy. In other cases, people bring their own devices. I would say a good portion of them use Apple devices. So this is really useful information for all of them. Quick question, just as a follow-up for the one point you made. You mentioned that that's something you would set up through where you purchase your device. Are you talking about if you buy these devices direct from Apple, or does your local retailer, would that be something you could do if you do a bulk purchase from a local retailer, or does it have to be an Apple store?
Through an Apple store or through retailers like Amazon or PC Connection, Best Buy, any larger, or even Verizon and AT&T cellular vendors, they all are signed up with this. So you basically log into your Apple Business Manager account, enter some numbers that AT&T or whoever gives you, and that pairs them up to your account. And then you pair your Apple account to your MDM, and you're done. So once those two are paired up, you're good to go. When they send you one iPad or 10 iPads, they're all automatically added to your system and ready to go.
That could be really useful. Good information.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead. Okay, so keep going. And
yeah. So basically, you don't need iCloud, of course, and you can also get an Apple Store account if you wish. They'll give you price breaks and access to their developer team, which can be nice for some questions you have related to security.
There you go. And then this is the business manager interface. Yes.
Now, again, like I said earlier, there is the equivalent of this on the Android side. It's just we don't use Androids here, so
Sure.
I'm going to focus on Apple because that's what we do. And so user roles, you can set up different users inside here with all access control or limited access, whichever you prefer. DP is integrated in here. You can you see all your devices. You can retire DP devices because, like I said, if it's wiped, after it comes back up, it's still going to look at Apple, and Apple's going to tell it to look at you. So you do have to retire devices out of here if you're done with them. And then you also can purchase the paid or free apps inside here, and that will then load over to your MDM solution. Apple does not provide an MDM themselves. They just let that be a public market thing. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and they're like I mentioned earlier, AT&T, Verizon, Amazon, all of them, pair up with Apple and Mobile Iron, GF, Moz 360, and there's a huge list of other ones out there that I'm sure are just fine as well.
Great. You mentioned you guys use Mobile Iron, but JamF is what would you say is a good way to identify a good mobile device manager? How do you evaluate that and determine which one's the right choice for your organization?
Sure. Yeah, well, a few things. One, you would probably want to pick something a slightly more popular, maybe not the most obscure one, so that they have the resources to support it. You'd want to make sure they have good support. See if you can call up their support line, make sure that you get someone that you feel comfortable with. You have a good sales contact is good, just like with OnBoard, which, Brian, you do a great job, by the way.
I'm not paying him for that, folks. That's free praise. So
yeah,
there's no bribery involved, right, Michael?
Yes, very true. It's all natural. So, but also you want to do some Googling and just see if they've had any security breaches or concerns of that nature. You want to verify all their documents they give you about security to make sure they have proper insurance and processes in the background to make sure they're not leaving open issues about security. And so, yeah.
Fantastic. All good points. Thanks for sharing those, Michael.
Sure. Okay, and as I said earlier, users are your last line of defense. You need to teach them password basics, not use password 123 or something of that nature, and that's enforceable using an MDM. You can teach them how if they're an OnBoard user, for example, that they need to be careful when they hand their device to other people, because if they've set up automatic logins in OnBoard, they need to be aware that someone else may possibly get access to that. So that's an education point right there with Touch ID, for example.
Absolutely.
And that's one nice feature of having the passcode inside of OnBoard is, you shouldn't be giving that out ever, of course. So on physical iPad security, that's pretty common sense. Don't leave your devices out in the open if you're a business that uses this. And then also trying to keep as up to date as possible on your iOS and Android updates, because hackers continually find new holes in every operating system. It's a cat and mouse game. And the closer you are to the latest update, the less holes there are. Most of those holes require some pretty advanced skills for a hacker to try to take advantage of, but by no means is it always difficult. Sometimes some security breaches happen because of holes that were easily patched. And so we try to keep ours very, very close to the latest update.
And I think that's actually really good advice with any type of electronic device. I don't care if it's a mobile device, a phone, a tablet that you're using for work, or even a personal device, or even your laptops or computers. You know, if you don't have the latest version of Windows or the latest Windows update and stuff, that's where they fix those holes with those updates. So yeah, it's important for that.
Plus, you get nice new features usually.
Yeah, so. We'd like to think so. So yeah, talk a little bit about now these are some of the hardware choices that you guys have made as an organization. Why these choices?
Yeah, these are basically, the Apple Pencil is nice for signing stuff. If you use the signing feature inside OnBoard, there's a little more fine signatures that happen if you use a real Apple Pencil compared to like a stylus. It ignores your wrist if you rest your wrist on the screen. And it has a higher detail, like a DPI, dots per inch. So your signature looks more real. And then the other stuff is obviously totally optional, like keyboards. You're not typing into OnBoard a great deal, but if you are making annotations and notes, then those keyboards can be nice. A keyboard case, that if you use an Apple iPad Pro, then you can have a thing called a smart connector where you don't even have to Bluetooth pair it. It just powers itself off the iPad, and that's shown on the right. And then on the left, there's a case we like. It has magnets that hold the base together so the iPad doesn't flop down. Then the keyboard in the middle is just a nice keyboard when users are using their iPad with at their desk that has a Windows or a Mac or something computer, that they can plug that keyboard into the computer and use Bluetooth to have it tied to their iPad at the same time, and they just toggle between the two.
I noticed your picture here, your sample, your Apple Pencil actually is branded with your bank's logo or your bank's name. Is that you really have? Oh, that's cool.
If you buy this Apple Pencil through Apple, they will allow you to type that for free and brand it for you. You could brand it with an item number if you wish to keep track of them that way, or just your company name.
Huh. Well, isn't that cool? Well, I think that kind of wraps it up for your presentation. Now's the point of the conversation. We can open it up to questions from our attendees. If you have any questions, feel free to either type those in the Q&A or raise your hand. There's a tool there for you can raise your hand. I have Jesse monitoring the Q&A tool here, and we'll take it. I think we asked a couple questions as we went along. Just to get the ball rolling, I'll go ahead and come up with kind of talk a little bit about it. I just happened to, totally randomly, I happened to actually get my iPad Pro 11-inch in the mail yesterday. I actually just got a brand new iPad, so I was glad to see you had a couple of cases in there. Why did you guys make the choice to use mobile or Apple tablets as opposed to some of the other devices that are out there?
Sure. So basically, the security of the device is our number one reason. Android is not necessarily an insecure platform, especially over time. They've increased their security a great deal. With that said, since Apple does control the hardware and the software side, they kind of have a closed ecosystem, and they have a very secure Apple store where it's difficult to load other apps. And on the Android side, you have a little bit more openness, which is a good thing in many ways, but for a business, we prefer to be as locked down as possible. And so that's the biggest reason why we went with Apple. But also, the updates are updated across all devices. Every time they come out with a new one for around 5 years or more. On the Android side, they tend to drop off on updates after maybe 2 years or so, because they're looking to sell their newest device, which is understandable. But since Apple makes money off of services on their devices, they're fine with giving you free updates, because as long as you're paying them money for Apple Music or whatever it is, they're happy. So they still want to sell you new devices, so they hold out some features. But, for the most part, all security updates continue for many years with Apple devices.
Yeah, I found that out myself. The new Apple Pencil doesn't work with the old iPad Pros.
Yeah, and that's one other thing nice, just since we mentioned hardware, I know this is all about security, but the new Apple Pencil wirelessly charges on the side of the iPad, which is nice because the old Pencil you had to plug into the bottom of your iPad, which is a little bit awkward and easy to break.
Okay. Jesse, we have any questions from our viewer panel, our listener panel?
Nothing yet. So we obviously encourage anybody who does have questions or wants to further this conversation. We invite you to either leverage the Q&A, which is available to you inside of Zoom, or you can leverage the chat feature, which is also available to you in that toolbar within Zoom.
Yeah. But of course, we're going to make this recording. There was a lot of technical stuff that we went over, a lot of very specific names and stuff. This recording will be available on our community page. We also have a Passageways YouTube channel that we will be posting it as well. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, we have webinars both from the CSM side that we've hosted, our marketing team has hosted going back years. If you want to see some early examples of what OnBoard used to look like 5 years ago, there's some older recordings there, and I think everybody would see it a little enlightening to see the differences and the changes we've made in the last 5 years. I kind of was going through that as well. Looks like we have a Q&A person typing a question for the queue.
Yeah, Karen says, why is mobile device management needed when OnBoard does have its security systems and protections?
That's a really good question. Why did you choose? Now, I think from the OnBoard side of things, OnBoard locks it down through the material for OnBoard. But I think, Michael, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys chose a mobile device manager because you're using these devices for other applications outside of OnBoard. Go in a little more detail on why you guys chose, why mobile device management was a good choice for your organization.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. We use it for many other reasons besides OnBoard. Mobile email, video conferencing. We open accounts with iPads. We do many things, and so we need something to secure them and monitor them and make sure that no data is leaked out of those. And so that's why we have to have an MDM. Now, with OnBoard, why you would possibly want an MDM solution, especially if you're a larger organization, would be because OnBoard, the connection between OnBoard and the Passageway servers is secure, and we verified that, and that's great. But even on an iPad or an Android, you can take screenshots, and you could someone's device could get stolen, and then if you wrote your password somewhere, like on a sticky note, then that person could possibly get in with that. And so if a device is stolen or lost, we can remotely wipe that device and have no concern, even if that person's password was written down on a sticky note, which is a big no-no on policy anyways. But
no, Michael, I can't imagine a situation where a board or director might write down his password on a sticky note and put it on the back of his iPad, leave that in his briefcase, and have his briefcase walk away when he left it somewhere in a taxi cab or anything. That would never happen.
Never happen, yeah. So, and the fact that we can unlock the device remotely is one of the big bonuses, because every once in a while, you have a board member who changed their passcode on their device, and they're using their Touch ID to unlock it for a few days in a row, and then the device reboots, and that's when Apple, for at least, I'm not sure on the Android side, but on the Apple side, requires you to type in your good old-fashioned passcode. And if they've forgotten that, they call us up, we send a remote code to it, and it unlocks itself.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's another question from the audience.
Michael said something about multiple users using the same devices regarding the MDM system. Could you go into a little bit more explanation on this? Yeah.
So there's, I'm going to talk from the MobileIron point of view because that's the MDM we use. So they have a feature in there that we call secure sign-in, and you apply that per device. And you can apply settings per device or per person, by the way. So everything, all the lockdown settings are per device, or almost everything is per device or per person. But and when that person signs in to secure sign-in, if they've been given email rights, email will load. And if they've been given OnBoard rights, the OnBoard app will load. They will still have to log into OnBoard with their own login. And then, other settings will apply based on who that person is. And when they're done, they can sign out of that app. So you can unlock the device and get to the desktop of the screen, no matter who you are, if you have the passcode to the device. But after that, you sign into that secure sign-in, and then that's when you get your customization.
Gotcha. I think so. I think I see the point. So basically, you can have a generic iPad sitting there on the counter, and whoever needs it picks it up, signs into their personal login that you've set up through the MDM, and then when they log in, no matter who's using the device, it only allows them to access or even see the apps that they would normally have access to. So, for example, if we're using again a bank analogy for simple purposes. If you have an Apple or a tablet that's shared amongst a branch, you have a branch cashier pick it up, they're only going to see the apps a cashier should see. If the branch manager, who happens to also be a member of the board, picks it up and logs in, they would see the apps that they would need access to, including, say, for example, OnBoard. Is that accurate?
That's completely accurate. That's exactly how it functions here. So,
yeah, there you go. So hopefully that answered your question. We're about the time for our 30 minutes, and I don't believe we have any other questions. If you do, feel free to email your CSM. We can reach out to Michael informally and ask him to answer any other questions that you might have. And again, we are going to post this online. Just as one last thing, I just want to talk a little bit about the webinars that we have coming up next month. Next month is going to be we're for spring renewal. It's May. Fresh flowers, so we're going over some fresh ideas for OnBoard from users. We're going over frequently asked questions, best practices from the users of successful organizations, and we're going to clean out those old ideas and bring in some new best practices for our springing into spring with OnBoard. We'll come up with something catchier than that. That's the best I could do on the fly. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Michael, for sharing your insight, your knowledge on how you guys keep your mobile devices secure. Thank you all. We're going to go ahead and sign off now, and you have a great rest of your day, and feel free to have a second cup of coffee for yourself. It's good for you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
all right, bye, everybody.